Yeah, so today's session will be on extending Sitecore Analytics contacts configuration with custom facets. So just to give a background of what Sitecore Analytics is, usually I mean Sitecore has this feature for tracking users that visits their website and like gathering statistics on each of those users. So if we take users, there are two different categories that they can be divided into. One is identified users. Those are people with who have registered with the site, who have a profile with the site, who probably will be using their email address or mobile number to log in. And the other users are called unidentified users or anonymous users. So Sitecore basically tracks analytics, Sitecore Analytics basically tracks information on both of those users. And later this information is being used to generate analytical information such as their behavior patterns and all. So as you go on, I'll explain further. So facets, so each of these users will have something called a profile that is created in analytics, which will track some basic information about them. Not basic, and facets custom facets basically allow us to extend the profile that Sitecore provides by default to add custom information to track custom related information that probably a special company would specifically need. To start off the presentation, there are some resources. I'll probably share these slides with you later once this session is over. So I have used the documentation that has been provided by Sitecore for this session. So basically we'll start off with contacts, and then we'll talk about the contact data model, and then we'll go into creating custom facets to extend this data model to track specific information that we need. Okay, so when you talk about contacts, main entity or the main thing that comes into mind, the top level, is called a contact entity. So that is the contact profile, rather, of a user. So this contact entities, as I said, can be of two categories, or can be of two user types. One is identified and one is unidentified, logged in or non-logged in users. These entities basically store information, as I said again, about each user that visits the website in the Sitecore Analytics database. So how the analytics database works, for those of you who are not familiar, first the information will be on user session end. That is, if the user closes the browser, closes the website, or logs out of the website, it will push the analytical information into, it will write whatever that is being stored in the session in the memory of the server, it will push it to MongoDB. Or it has a process on a given time, it will push everything to MongoDB. And from MongoDB at a given particular point, a configured point, it will run a task on it and push everything to the reporting database in SQL, where Sitecore will use that information to generate the analytics reports. So if you take a custom contact entity, facets are the ones that are being used to gather this information or to create this information. So entities are basically uniquely identified by two keys. One is a GUID, as already you might be familiar with .NET GUIDs, and the other one is an email. So Sitecore Analytics guarantees that these two, both of them, the GUID and the email that is being used in analytics, will be unique, so that there won't be any duplicated records. Yeah, so if we look at the information that the entity contact tracks, contact entity tracks. I have given a few samples here, but if you look further into the code or probably debug one of the contact entity models, you can see we can see like what the Sitecore system default ones and probably a project specific ones that have been tracked. So to name a few will be the name, phone number, picture, email. Interaction history is like the customer's interaction with the website, probably the pages that the person navigates to, goals that he clicks, the triggers, like whatever the adverts that he clicks on, etc. So next will be the contact data model. So the contact data model describes the contact entity's data structure. So this is how a contact is architectured in the psychoanalytics. So basically, yeah, again, while with using facets, at any point, if you are not familiar with anything, if you want to ask questions about something that is you are not sure of, please go ahead. So facets are being used. I'll show you a diagram later how these facets are, what these facets are. So contact data model basically defines the structure of the contact. So you have three categories. One is called system, and standard and custom. System is system default one, what Sitecore provides by default. These are permanent data structures. They cannot be changed. These values cannot be disabled. So it's definitely records these information for a contact. Standard ones are the ones Sitecore provides. So basically standard ones include some attributes like address, email, phone, name, etc. for a user. These ones can be extended, change, the values can be changed. We could force. I'll show you later during the demo. Custom ones are company specific ones that we can create. So we have the standard that that the system records for a user. We have the system ones which cannot be disabled, which are like metadata, probably that Sitecore needs definitely. And then we have the standard ones what Sitecore uses, and then we have custom ones what we generate to record the information that is specific to a company or an organization. If you take the facet configurations are done in a configuration file called Sitecore Analytics model.configuration file. So as you can see in the image below, we have in this file we have two sections. One we define the elements, and in the other one we define the facets. Just to give you an overview how this data structure, the contact data model works. So we have the contact entity on top. That is the say you can probably think contact entity as a specific user. So for this user, you can have different facets. So facet you can say is like a class, right? A sort of like a grouping of information. So facets can have subclasses, like elements. So elements can hold attributes, which are the ones that we actually save values in. And then also elements can be saved as dictionaries, so that this data can be not duplicated, but then saved in lists, not individually. We'll come to that. So
yeah. Do you have any real-time example saying what are the facets?
Yeah. Okay. So let's quickly jump to MongoDB. So if I quickly show against this data structure, so this particular user, this personal in this personal section you can see my name, and then under the identifier you can see the email address. So this particular contact has been tracked by the email address, and then the personal information that you can see are the Sitecore standard ones. So first name, surname, birthday, and there's a few more that Sitecore adds. So whatever we provide the information into Sitecore, into analytics, it will record in XDB. And these are the custom facets we have created. So this you can consider as the facet level. And then inside the facet we have a data dictionary and element dictionary, and it has two elements. So each element will have a name and then 2 fields, 2 attributes. So demo info field 1 and 2 are the 2 attributes. So this is, again, to summarize, we have the facet, company specific user data, and then we have a element dictionary underneath because it holds more than one value, and then each element dictionary will have an element, and then that element has attributes. Okay, is that clear? Okay. So again, to come back to the configuration file, so we define the elements. We define the elements in the configuration file as well as the facets. So to define the elements, it requires that we mark the facet also as an element to be recorded. If not, analytics will throw an error. So we have, when you go to the code, okay, let's jump into the code for a second. So we have the facet created, as you can see on the screen. So company specific user data record is an iFacet type, and then we have the element created, company record. So this is in plural tense. This is in records there, and then it's a naming convention that we generally use. And then this is gonna be a singular, and then we have attributes underneath that. The facet is gonna hold element dictionary in this case, so that we could record multiples of this element. As long as this grouping name will be different, it will keep adding to the dictionary. If not, what will happen is that specific element itself will keep getting replaced. If you add one particular one, I'll show you when it comes to the demo how this gets updated. So again, we have a facet there, and then we have an element created. So if you jump to the configuration file, you can see the Sitecore requires the element to be configured with the namespace name, and the contract class. This is the implementation of the namespace, and then we need the facet also to be in that line as well. And then in the facet section, we have to configure the facet there. Okay. Yeah. So if we take what a facet is, facet is, as I said, is basically a grouping of information. So this can be like, you can probably group it as personal facet, maybe company A related information. Maybe you can have another facet for there are consents, like for form submissions, for email subscriptions and all, to record information. So basically, when you take a user, it can have a certain set of groupings of information. So facets lets us group this information, right? And to be saved together. And then facet data types. So facet holds, just to summarize again here, so facets can hold elements, and then it has attributes. Elements have attributes, and dictionaries basically holds lists of elements, right? So attributes basically can be any .NET type, strings to integers to date, time, to double, to any value. Elements can be compound attributes. They are show you they are groupings, rather. They're groupings of attributes. So if I show you that in the demonstration, yeah, let's quickly jump onto the site. Actually, that will have a better example of that. So I coordinate is an element, right? So element can have attributes, longitude and latitude. Those are the .NET types, floating point. And then I place is a type of element again, and then this will have a compound. This I place is a compound element. So which because it has I coordinate, which is again an element. So elements can hold elements like subclasses, and it has a attribute as well. So two attributes. One is an element, a compound element, and then we have the facet. That in this case, the facet again holds element dictionary. Is that clear? Yeah. And okay. And then we have characteristics. Again, it's a small explanation of what sort of information will be stored. So facets basically, the attributes basically hold straightforward information like name of a town, email address, an age, a telephone number, a country, etc. Elements can hold attributes as well as it's a compound data structure. It can hold other elements as well. So facet is the place where we have a list of elements or an element. That's where we do the groupings of these elements and create a create the grouping. So we did this data structure. I hope that this is more clear now. And then yeah, we have the contracts. So contract, if I'm not, yeah, contracts are basically can be known as implementations of the interfaces that we create for facets and elements. So this will basically define what information will be stored, what these attributes will store and return. So if I show you the contract classes, so we have the element interface here, and if you go to the implementation, this is going to be the contract class. So this is going to define, this is going to give meaning rather to this. So it's going to define like what fields implement the interface, and ensure like what this element is going to store and return in its value. So in this case, it's going to be string types. We are not going to have any compound attributes here to keep it simple. And so is the interface. So this is the implementation of the interface contract, iFacet contract. So it's gonna give you the implementation of the element dictionary. So this is just gonna return. The element dictionary. Create and return the element dictionary. So to create an element, we need to inherit from the iElement interface. To create a facet, we need to inherit from the iFacet interface. Yeah, so that's the boring side of it, the theoretical side. Let's quickly jump into the code. I can show you how this code is set up. So we need to have a bunch of interfaces, classes, and configurations to set this up. So looking into the configuration, as I said before, analytics model, Sitecore analytics model configuration file will hold configure the configurations for elements and facets. So in the element section, we need to define the elements that we are going to define. You can see here above the Sitecore default ones that already analytics uses. And then here I have introduced the custom one that I'm going to be using, and then also we need a record of the facet there as an element. And then in the facet section, I have defined my facet. So it's going to hold the interface and the implementation, the contract class. In the facet section, it's just the contract that we need to define. That the interface. Okay.
You have a duplicate there?
Which one?
this element?
No, Chaturanga, this is the element. So you can see it's a record, it's singular tense, and this is the facet.
Okay.
Yeah. So we need the facet declaration as well here, configuration. Okay, and after that we have to introduce the facet. We have to implement the facet element rather. Let's to the element. So we have to create an element. So in this case, I have inherited from the element class, and I have two fields there. And then if you go to the facet, I have the I have this interface inherited from my facet, and I have defined an element. So if this is going to be a single element, you can just type I element and define my element and get. So that would be it. And then of course you need to implement this in the implementation. So if you go back to the facet class, we have this is going to be the name of the facet. In this case, the facet dictionary. So if you jump here, so this is going to be the facet dictionary, and it's going to hold the name for that. And then we have the creating of the dictionary. We have to in the implementation, of course, in the constructor, we had to do this line of code to ensure the data type. So even in the facet element implementation, okay, here this isn't done, but then we need to have the constructor for this class, and we need to say ensure this data type, just like we have done here. Okay, so we don't need to do that for the .NET specific types. What's the reference? Yeah, we only need to do that. We only need to do that. These coordinates. Oh yeah, so this is inherited from the coordinate class. What am I missing here? Oh. Yeah, so it's initial attribute there. Because elements hold attributes, and these are .NET basic .NET types, and then it ensure those attributes. And then yeah, that's about it. We have the facets and the classes, the implementations of those facets and elements configured. And then what we need to do is we could use them. We could create a XDB repository if you have a XDB repository created. So this particular method here, set contact data. What happens here is we get the users what do you call the specific users the personal information that's already in XDB, and then assign the attributes with the details that we need to save. So this basically is for the Sitecore default ones, the standard fields, first name, surname, birthday. And then we have create company specific data record. So here we have what we have done is basically this is gonna populate the XDB values for our custom fields that we have created. So this basically takes in a bunch of models. So it's gonna take a bunch of models, with the information that the user has provided that we need to track, and then it's gonna get the element. Okay, I'll show you how that happens, and then see if that record is available, and then create or update it. So if I show how we get this personal info, if I go to this method, it says it goes to the current analytics tracker current, and we call get facet, and I contact personal info is the Sitecore default one, Sitecore standard one. So this facet defines birthday, surname, further first name, surname, job title, middle name, etc. These fields. So that configuration is coming from this facet over here. So to get that facet, we just have configured the facet name. I'll see that. So this is the personal facet name, personal name of the personal facet. And then what we do is in the repository we call get personal facet, and we pass in the facet name. And we have called get company specific user record facet, and then here also we call get facet from the current context by sending our facet name. So if I go to this particular configuration, you can see that I have given the facet name here. So this should be the same as the name that we provide here when we define the facet in the configuration file. So the name that gives here should go, basically that's the facet name that we use to retrieve the facet. Okay. And then once we have that, basically if the personal contact exists, we just update it, right, with the information that the user has added new. If not, the default one is going to be created by Sitecore automatically once the user session ends. We don't have to do it specifically, but the custom one that we do, we need to create or update. So what we do is we get the element, the facet with the element names, with the element dictionary, and check if the dictionary is available. So what we do is we check if the dictionary is available. Yeah, if it does, we check if the element grouping is available. These groups, for that we pass in a group name, check if the group is there. If that's there, then we are going to populate the fields, update the fields rather. If not, we are just going to use element dictionary, element data record dot create, and create a new one from that group name. So just to show you site, what this is all about. So this is going to be the customer details that we're going to pass here, and then this is going to be a group name. So for demonstration purposes, I'm going to I have added a field to provide a group name, and then we have the custom fields, where we can populate these two custom fields from here, like test data and test data. So once we submit this information, it's gonna come to this particular section. If I show you this model, it will hold the group name and the two demo fields. So which is going to be this particular section, and which is going to record into this particular small element over there. Okay. So what we do is here, as I said, we check if the element is already existing in the dictionary. If not, we create it. If it already does, we are just going to retrieve it. By just providing the element name. It returns a dictionary, so we can just provide the element name and get the record, and then use those fields to be updated. Use the record to update the fields. Okay, and so I'm just gonna do a submit on that. I've written a small code to any user session so that we can see the information quickly. Collections, contact. This is the XDB database that gonna record all these interactions. So if we jump into contact, we can see that company specific user data facet that we have created appearing, and then we have a set of data records, and then we have grouping one that has the two fields. Right, that we have submitted. So we have the facet there, we have the element dictionary, and we have the element with the two attributes. So if I change this to group 2 and test data, start that, submit in session, and refresh. We can see the new group being added. Because it's a dictionary, it's gonna keep adding as long as the element, the group name is different. So if I do group 1 again, what it's gonna do is, you can see I have added stars, just like in the second one. So if I go to documents, check this, it's gonna update the group 1 because the group name is already existing. Now we have checked if the group name already exists. If it does, we're just gonna update the fields. So this is how basically we could track information and make sure that it stays, it saves in the analytics database. Just to say what happens if you don't have a dictionary, it's basically what what happened over here when we provided the same group name will happen if there's no dictionary there. It's just gonna update the same record of an element. So if you need the historical data to remain, or for different elements, different element types to remain in XDB, what we're going to do is you're going to use the dictionary so that it will hold with the specific key, and then keep updating those attributes for the specific element that we need to update as and when needed. Yeah, so how the magic works is that each time a user submits, how analytics is going to pick up the specific record for the email address is going to be from the, let me show you that. It's going to be from the identifier that we have used. So that's gonna be in this particular line. So in the repository we have a method called identify contact, we are first going to check if the tracker is active, if analytics is running. If it's running, what we are going to do is current session, and we are going to call identify on the key that we are using. So if you are, in this case, since we are, as I said before, it can be a GUID or a email address. So in this case, we are using an email address. So once we call this, what happens is the particular users that contacts information will be loaded onto the session into memory, and whatever we do, whatever the updates, in get personal info, getting the personal info facet will be from the same user. Getting the custom facets, will be from the same user. Whatever the attributes we update will be saved in the same user. Yeah. Okay. So will be of the same user, and once the analytics session, once the user session ends, it will push everything to XDB. So I'll show you another thing. If I change this email, if I change this to, let's say, erasure, and then group.com, and then let's say test group 1 data 1 2, and then I do a submit on this, and I do view documents. You can see that oh, we have a new record, analytics record here. So in session 12. So you can see new identifier for the new user, the old one, and then he's gonna have the same attributes, for this new user. And if I'm to open a new browser, go to the same site and provide erasure, let's say here in Firefox, yeah, and go to codehouseGroup.com. Yeah, let's get over, make sure that we have the same grouping, and I'm gonna say test group 1, updated 1, 2. So what I'm going to show you is that even if this user logs in from a different browser or different device, from anywhere in the world, by using the same identifier, same email address that he previously used, it's gonna maintain this information under that particular user itself. So if I do a submit and do an end session and go back to analytics and do view documents, you can see only 2 records again, and this is going to be for this particular user. And here you can see the test combinations. Wow. Okay, you can see that the test group 1 was something that we created before, and then test group 1 is the one that we created new with the updated values. Yeah, if you open up the person, you can see erasure, the personal name also has been updated because he used the same, but the identifier, same identifier, but the identifier does not change. Identifier does not change. If you change the identifier, it's going to create a new record. It's going to identify the user as a new user. So one thing we have to be careful of, if you're using more than one identifier, that we have to ensure in our application that we manage it properly. Make sure that we track these users under one particular identifier and don't mix it up. And in case they do, we have the option of signing with a mobile number and a email address, and we can do an aggregation manually, like to pick the particular user from a email address or something, to identify the user, to make sure that we somehow bring it back to one particular identifier and save it in XDB. Okay. Okay, that's about it. Any questions?
Yeah, we define the identifier.
config files or ingesting the code?
So Sitecore default one, Sitecore by default, I think it uses two. Yeah, GUID and
if you want to create a custom.
That's something that we might have to check.
I think we can.
Chaturang? Chaturang, do you know how we can create a new identifier if you want to create anything more than the email address or the GUID?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, even I haven't come across that because even the application that we have done, we use the email address usually. And then if you're using more than one, if you're using an phone number or something, what we usually do is make sure that we have a way of tracking whose phone number is it for that email address. So what we do is we can have a cookie session. If the user logs in, we can save some values in the cookie. And if a user submits the form, we can use the values in the cookie to see which user is submitting this form or where this information is coming from. And then we can have this specific identifier saved in a cookie or something to be retrieved later. So even if he fills in a mobile number, we can use a previous used email address to track the customer.
Normally, email address the correct?
Yeah, so Sitecore provides by default the GUID and email address. That's something that they use. Yeah, I'm not very sure of.
But I might. When we are by default, Sitecore doesn't define which identifier should be used from your profile information. So we have to, from the code, we have to mention map this profile user ID or email with the contact database or the MongoDB. So maybe if we change it to something like telephone number or something, when we are initially doing that tracking or the mapping, then maybe it might creating it automatically, but I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
The serialized classes.
Yeah.
Is it the mapping, right?
Yeah. So these classes, the contract classes.
Serialized site checking. Site checking. Site checking. No.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a kind of mapping of the class to the.
Yeah. So this is we define the interface for facets and elements. Then after that we have these two classes here. The contract classes. What we do here is we actually do the implementation. So we write the getters, setters, and ensure dictionary or ensure element or ensure attribute. So which will guarantee that it will pick the correct attribute or element when this particular facet is being retrieved. Is bound with this facet or the element that we get, and then we set the getters and setters. So if it's only a setter, if we have only gets, we could only define a getter. If you have getters and setters both, we can define accordingly. Okay, done here. So what sort of values, if you want to do custom work on these, when you retrieve or save a value, we can do it here.
Okay.
And define contacts. Yeah. Yeah. So as Chaturanga said, in the code, the one that we use to identify a user. Yeah. The one that we use here is identified by email. Samir?
Sorry?
The one that we use here to identify user in the current session in the tracker is in analytics is the email. So we can use anything else that we need. But the problem is if we use multiple of these identify methods, say another one, if I say phone number, okay?
So there should be a unique way to track.
Yeah, exactly. So the problem, as I said before, the problem is gonna be that if it's the same user who is using their mobile number and the email, this is gonna track as two different users in analytics. So once you generate the reports, it's gonna break this user's behavior patterns into two groups. So to be more thorough or be more realistic, what we need to do is have a way of recognizing whose email or phone, if you're using multiple identifiers, this is, and then make sure that those information is aggregated when you push it. So instead of
should be first we should identify the unique page that we can store in session. Then
exactly, like you have to maintain something across the site. So if it's a phone number that you're going to maintain across the site, you have to make sure that it's a phone number. So you are going to use the identify method to identify that user with the phone number. So a user can probably use the same email address to submit a form, but you use that email address, get that user's phone number, and use that phone number to get the analytics contact record. So you have to do that mapping. That's like some work that we had to do on top to make sure that the user information is tracked in one location or one contact.
so the very first thing is to store data in session and then to
So storing in the session happens automatically. Once you provide all this information, Sitecore, there's pipeline that records everything. So but only the custom ones that we need to look into. So if we do any update, if you want to do specific updates to the Sitecore default facets, like change the email name or the birthday date and all, we could do that here as well. But if not, Sitecore does it anyway. So if we go back to the slides, these ones, the standard ones that Sitecore provides, so it's gonna be maintained by default. So what we're gonna have to do manually is the ones that we do for custom. Okay. Anything else, guys? Okay, I think that concludes my session for today. Thank you very much. Chaturanga,
you want to add something? Chaturanga, you want to add some more to our session?
No, it was a good session. Thank you very much for this.
Okay, no problem. Come.
So this is the end of our meetup.
User group meetup, I think, for today.
So thank you for participating in our June meetup, and Chaturanga also thank for you joining to the meetup again. And we'll be try to do another session on next month or afterwards. I think we have already two invitations came, right, Chaturanga, from the U side, yeah. So we will try to do it in next session. And thank you all again. See you there.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.